does it take to be a self-sufficient maker? How do we acquire our knowledge? And to what extent are you subject to crafting influencers and advertising? This is the second part of my most recent conversation with return guest Shams Eldin-Rogers, in which we explore these ideas. We also share what's giving us hope as we push into 2026. So stick around a few minutes and we'll get into it. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 17 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, lovely one. How are you doing? Thanks as ever for clicking play on this episode. So have you had any sustainability and or mending wins lately? So here's a lovely win that ticks both those boxes that was left in the community chat space in the Check Your Thread Patreon by patron Annika. Annika writes, I've been devoting a decent amount of time to trying to sew and mend over the last year, and my partner has had to listen to me talk endlessly about it. But he's gotten on board recently, coming up with a design for an upcycled denim apron, and he even mended a pair of socks last night. He watched videos, went to the sewing store and got some wool thread, and then he did it. He said he would be the official sock mender in our house. Yay! Love that one. And here's one from Kate. Not mending related, but an excellent reminder to all of us that sometimes just asking gets you what you need without having to buy new and even without having to pay. Kate writes, I had used FreeCycle before to give things away, but never to ask for something until yesterday. I'm learning to drive and I need L plates for our car. I posted and an hour later got a reply. The lovely person even dropped the plates off today. Thanks Annika and Kate, and to all the other patrons who have left sustainability wins in the Patreon lately to inspire the rest of us. Speaking of patrons, thanks heaps to new patrons Keris, Julianne and Annie for signing up to support the podcast over the last week. Also, huge thanks to Polly, who recently came back to supporting the podcast. And huge thanks to Patricia, who kindly upped the amount of their support. You are all awesome. So we are just about to have a Check Your Thread patron meetup in London this weekend. And there is another in real life Check Your Thread patron meetup scheduled for next month on Saturday, the 21st of February in York. So if you fancy getting together with other awesome Check Your Thread heads and hanging out, checking out some fabric and haberdashery and having a good old natter, then head to patreon.com/checkyourthread where you can join up for any amount per month that makes sense to you. And then you can keep your eyes peeled on the Patreon feed for details of those meetups. So let's get into this episode and the second part of my most recent conversation with Shams. But before we do, I want to say that my heart goes out to the communities in Minnesota affected by the recent brutality and to those who are trying to support them. And of course, my heart continues to break for those suffering in Gaza and in Sudan, and of course everywhere where there's currently conflict, famine and suffering. So I understand that with all that as the current backdrop, it can be hard to continue to push forward with the other things that are important right now, like trying to protect our planet and educating people to be better custodians of it. Which is why I'm so happy to have Shams on the podcast again at this time, because she reminds us that progress can be made and hope can be found. So, until next week, when you'll get another gorgeous conversation led by a friend of the podcast and guest interviewer Kat Canfield, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Try asking for whatever you currently need on FreeCycle or your local Buy Nothing group or even around your friends and neighbours. And enjoy!
Can we? First, I appreciate designers, but knitting is a folk craft. People have been knitting for, I think, about 1,000 years. And grandmas and aunties, and of course men too, people were knitting by looking at what other people had in their local community. And we know that in a lot of these countries, there would be things particular to one village or one region, one style that you would acquire from your neighbors. Now, it's great that we have books and we have internet and we can learn other kinds of styles, but it isn't because there's a certain person who's doing it. Or I think the focus on the designer obscures sometimes the nature of, do you know how to make a sweater that fits a human? Just you yourself. Like, so if I come to your house, and maybe it's a good question. If I come to your house and give you a kilo of yarn and I give you a set of knitting needles. I don't give you multiple sets. I give you a set because that's what you would get in your local community. You'd have one, and it often could be whittled from wood and carefully sanded down over time. If I come to your house and give you a kilo of yarn and some needles, let's just say 3.5 millimeters in diameter, 3.5 millimeter needles, can you make a sweater?
No.
No.
You gave me some fabric.
Okay, good. If I came over your house and gave you 4 yards of wool fabric, can you make a thing?
I could make a thing. Yeah.
Okay, what could you make?
Yeah, I reckon I could. It'd probably be along the more kind of like bog coat kind of vibe. You know, I reckon I could whip up some sort of basic, but functional garment. Yeah.
Okay, so that means you can sew. I think that that's the kind of ways that people were doing this. They were weaving it if they were in a community where they could weave the fabric, or they're buying it from a trader, and then they would make the thing that they make. A bog coat, I think, doesn't it, from your ancestors?
Good question. I think it's more Scandinavian, isn't it?
Okay.
I think, but I am European.
Right. Aren't they like all there together?
I don't know.
I mean, to me, when you're saying I'm not Scandinavian, to me, I thought that I would think of the Scandinavians as part of your collective culture. Maybe I've been thinking of you wrongly.
Good question. I don't know. I don't know how those things work, really.
I meant cultural ancestry.
All right, sure.
Aren't you in a part of a cultural continuity with the bog jacket? I mean, you're not going to an abaya. You're not going to a
I'll take it. Yes, I see what you're saying.
that it's part of it's something that came from, to some degree, your people.
Yeah.
And you can make a thing out of what your ancestors might have made it.
Mm-hmm.
And now they did wear bog coats. Now they didn't wear like the cute little camisoles that you sometimes make, but that's a more recent part of your cultural history, and you can make those things. To me, that's the making. Using a pattern to create something else. Like sometimes I make a Korean hanbok. I don't pretend that I'm Korean now, but I can make a Korean hanbok. That's something that came from outside. It's not essential that I know how to do that in order to feel like I can sew.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be able to sew the things that come from your own culture, I think.
Interesting.
Or if you can't, they put those ads, sewing machine operator wanted. And you see those ads, or do you have those there?
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the newspaper? So that is operating a sewing machine. But if you can sew the things that you wear in your culture, I would call that you can sew.
Mm.
And the same thing for knitting. If you can knit, again, you come from a culture, I come from a culture where we wear socks here. We wear knitted socks, we wear hats, we wear sweaters, mittens, gloves, scarves. If you can knit those things, I'm counting that. Okay, you can knit now. I don't know. What do you think about these definitions?
It's interesting. So, I mean, when you were asking me if you gave me some fabric, could I make something? I was thinking of that challenge as making something without a commercial sewing pattern.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But is it possible to, or even necessarily relevant in this discussion, to be able to knit a hat without a pattern, but surely maybe you would have had to have followed a number of knitting patterns to get to a point where you don't need a pattern. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think this goes to the question of how do we acquire knowledge?
Exactly.
What do we think knowledge acquisition is? Because I think that, Grandma Indo-European living in, let's say, what is now Turkey, which, yes, we know that it's not an Indo-European language today, but that's because of migration, not because of the history there. She's living in what's now Turkey, and she can't read. Why would we ever assume that historically that knitting patterns were available to her in the first place and that was following them in the second place? I think she was looking at a hat that someone nearby had constructed, getting instruction from a nearby person, and then casting on 8 at the top and dividing them into 4 sections or doing whatever they were doing and counting on that until she could get to a hat that fit a person. And she might have had to take it out. She might have been instructed in Norway. You read that kids were instructed to take things back out and they had to re-knit and re-knit their sections because it didn't meet the standard of some older relative. So I hardly think that commercial patterns should be our standard for anything. I mean, commercial patterns in many cases started coming out in the 19th century.
Yeah. Well, because I think there's gaps in passing down of generational knowledge, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things like, sewing patterns and knitting patterns and stuff have had to kind of step in, isn't there? Because there's not necessarily that generational link to somebody
Mm-hmm.
who had the knowledge to pass it on.
I don't mean that we shouldn't do that or that it's
Mm.
invalid, but in the Shamsuddin Rogers definition of person can sew or person can knit, it is including that the person can do it now
Hmm.
with the tools and themselves. Could be rulers, tape measures, whatever. It doesn't mean that they can't choose to follow patterns, but I'd say, yeah, you should be able to make at least one thing from your culture.
Interesting.
That's my definition. And I really hope that people write in and say, yeah, you know what, Chumps, I think that's ridiculous. I don't agree with you. And this is why. Or they write in and say, yeah, go ahead, Chumps. I don't know, but I'd like to hear what they think about that. But I think that's my definition. Or take music. So I'm not a musician. I'm married to a professional musician. And he can play a piano without books, especially because he can't see. We know he obviously can play the piano without books. And we were last night at a jazz concert and we heard them saying to each other, okay, let's do this thing in this way. And then they play that thing.
That's
That is a
amazing.
musician. If you always have to be told what to do, you
Yeah.
never can do anything in your genre without someone else's instructions.
Yeah.
I would say no, you can't. You can't actually play clarinet.
Yeah. Do you know what? My son's just started piano lessons.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I really love about his teacher, who, funnily enough, is Turkish, what I really love about her is that right from the beginning, she, with some instruction of some sort of guidelines, encourages him to experiment and kind of create, not just
Hmm.
read lines that have
Hmm.
been written
Hmm.
by somebody else. And when I saw her do that, I was like, this is the teacher for him, because
Hmm.
that's going to make him a musician, as you say, not just somebody who can read music.
Right, right. And as I'm thinking about this more, this conversation is very interesting to me because when you retire, hopefully you have time for some contemplation of what do you wish to do better? What do you wish to pass on to younger people, younger relatives, things like that? I would think I'd like to pass along this self sufficiency
Mm,
in more than one area, not just the ones in which I'm an expert. I mean, I was paid to teach people how to learn languages, how to learn social studies, how to learn about managing their finances. I was paid to do that. I was an expert. I also would say that I'm an expert at knitting and sewing. But in general, I would like to pass along self-sufficiency. What about soap making? What do we all have to make soap all the time? No, but wouldn't it be nice to know how to make soap, to know how to do your laundry by hand if you had to?
to grow
These
some food.
To grow some food, absolutely. And also to preserve that food appropriately to your culture and climate. All of these things are the kinds of things I'd like to pass on.
I would also like you to pass on, or all of us to pass on, some more critical thinking skills as well, so people are less
Mm,
susceptible to the influences.
absolutely. How do you suggest we do that?
I was hoping you'd have the answers.
I mean, when I was teaching, I would show sometimes videos. I would show the affluenza
Mm,
video and sometimes put copies of part of a book. I'd assign reading of part of a book. It's a big book for ninth graders. You can't really assign it as additional reading. But just to say, what do you think about all of your consumption? What do you
Mm.
think about why people are consuming and how advertisers make you think that consumption is good? So I would do that when teaching. So Affluenza, great book.
Yes.
Um, I also, near the end of my career, would show Rashomon, a Japanese film in which people experience an event, but they tell the story from many different perspectives. And
Oh,
so
cool.
Rashomon, Rashomon, in the letters of English, it's a classic. And afterwards, I would ask students to think about, how do we decide, quote, what really happened? How do we make any sense out of what these people said? And I would teach the students how to look for corroboration, how to make charts about that. We still don't know. In Rashomon, they never tell you, quote unquote, what really happened. But
Ah.
you can think about, okay, several people mentioned this element, several people mentioned this element. How does that work? I think these are some things that people could do, but this was all before influencers. Influencers had started at the end of my career, the very tail end. And most of that, in the very end, I was teaching much younger kids, too young to really focus on that level of critical thinking. I think that's one thing I would do. I also would say to people, how do you get most of your knowledge? Do you have a subscription to a newspaper on the internet where, again, people are paid to go out and do research and use some kind of journalistic ethics to acquire it? Or maybe use your library's subscriptions. Many libraries, you can log in and read the newspaper there. Even state-sponsored broadcasts, they are saying something that has been checked by other people. Whether or not we want to believe all of it is a separate question, but everything you're getting coming through a medium where we don't know who funded it.
Mm.
I would say that I would ask those questions. And can you go to an older person when we're talking about the sewing, because that's really what your podcast really loves to focus on, sewing and sustainability. When we're talking about sewing or things relating to needles, can you find someone who knows how to do that? And a lot of these old people would love to spend time passing on. I certainly enjoy spend time passing on this kind of knowledge. And does the old person have a subscription to Influencer X? Or what do they do to, maybe they have some kind of old handwritten pattern with their notes in their spidery cursive from 1945 or something. And then you can see how they acquired the knowledge of the hobby. Again, I don't begrudge the internet. You and I never would have met
True.
without this internet. But that's not the only way we should be getting our knowledge.
That's a really good point. Did you get a chance to listen to the most recent episode with the German woman called Marielle?
No, I didn't listen to Marielle yet.
Oh, something that she has found. She's given herself the challenge, basically, in her life in general, but more recently, as she took up sewing about 5 years ago, to not buy new resources. And she acquires a lot of her things through like free cycle, buy nothing groups, things that she finds on the street. And what we were talking about was how that's created for her a different kind of relationship with her community and also the city
Mhm,
that she lives in, because the relationships and interactions that you have to have are different to going into a shop and ordering 3 meters of fabric for the thing you want to make. And I
I
think,
completely agree.
yeah, and I was really taken with the idea of, yeah, these you're creating new create connections, and I was likening it to the repair cafe that I volunteer at once a
Mhm,
month, and how that brings me into a space and having conversations with people that they don't geographically live very far from me, but I would
mhm,
probably never meet otherwise,
mhm,
and how valuable that's been. And I think that the more we are restricting our communities to these little pockets on the internet, although that can be
mhm,
incredibly nourishing, obviously, and beneficial to us, we also have to stop and think like, well, let's balance this out with more in real life, like putting yourselves deliberately in positions
Mhm.
where you are force is a bit strong word, but where you have to interact with people that aren't necessarily on your wavelength, aren't necessarily in your little
Mhm.
bubble, and
Mhm.
how important that is. And I'm seeing a lot of things ironically, on Instagram at the moment, people claiming how 2026 is going to be the year of analog, although that's clearly not true. Like, no one's going to suddenly shut down the internet, but
Mhm.
it gives me hope that there are going to be more people questioning, does my whole life need to live on the internet, and finding more spaces and opportunities to
Mhm.
interact with people in real life. I feel hopeful. I feel hopeful right
Yeah.
now for
I
2026.
absolutely agree and have been experiencing what Marianne described. So when I was doing the whole 10,000 yards challenge and I didn't have off-white sock yarn, I put in our local group in Vermont. I put this in, I'm doing a challenge. I'm not to buy any sock yarn. Can anyone trade me some or give me some? And then I met two different neighbors who responded to it and gave me some sock yarn and had a chance to sit and talk with one of them that they live right in. It's a very small community, but I didn't know them. So that was an opportunity to meet them. I've also met other people through that by lending things or giving things. And then recently, I told you earlier when you asked me about my artistic activity, I said I was doing some pasting and collaging. Well, I had bought some Japanese paste glue, rice paste glue. This is not plastic. Many of the kinds of glues that you buy in the store are partially or completely plastic.
Right.
This is actually just rice paste with a little bit of a preservative because that thing would go bad quickly. And I was trying to use the rice paste to try to stick it to something. And, it was lumpy. I wasn't doing it right. I went to YouTube University. Again, the internet can be great to see what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to use a brush and you're supposed to dilute the paste in water. So I go to my local art shop, in my neighborhood, and I buy a brush. The brush is made with goat hair, and
Cool.
it's clearly constructed in a way that you can replace the goat hair bristles when you want to. It's constructed for you to do that. So I thought, because I'm really more interested in textiles than I am in paper. I thought, well, can't I just get some replacement from my neighbors in Vermont? I mean, we got goats in Vermont. Why do I have to bring the goat hair all the way over from Japan? So I put again in the neighborhood group, and I'm asking, is this the right time of year? Can you just get goat hair any time of year? And if so, can I get some goat hair from somebody? And can I trade you for something? And some people said, hey, just come by. Some people apparently live on the street that is adjacent to mine. So it's not right to say they live on the corner, but they live on the street that is at the corner. We go down there and they say, well, we will comb out some goat hair for you.
Cool.
Another guy saying, I'll give you some pelts if you want to do something with them. So you're going to meet these people who are living in the same area, but you didn't know them because again, I'm just saying that how can it be economically sound for us to get goat hair from Japan
Yeah.
when there's goat hair on my block,
Yeah.
because it's a big block, but still. I agree with that. And her desire to buy no new stuff. You have to be willing to work with some kinds of materials that are a challenge or that maybe don't meet your standard. And as I was going back to saying about the paper, I've become rather precious about my stuff. And, growing up and my mother saying, you're going to get the cereal that's on sale. Now shut up. I'm not living that anymore, and I only want to use natural fibers. And when I'm with our collective in Toronto, the Works in Progress in Toronto, and we're supposed to be cutting fabric or sewing fabric, and then it has polyester. I don't want to do it. I don't do it. I don't. It's not just I don't want to. I'm not cutting it. I'm not dealing with it. I'm through with plastic. So if you're going to be taking supplies only through those ways, you're going to get a high percentage of stuff that, yes, it's a challenge. It's a creative challenge to work with. But now that I only want to use, I don't know, like I said, goat hair brushes, I can't adapt that kind of practice of only getting free or used stuff because they don't always have, wool. It has a percentage of nylon or, I'm just done. I don't know how many years God will allow me to remain on the earth or indeed allow the earth to continue. But however many they are, I'd really like it not to have this non-biodegradable substance being part of my craft. Like, you started asking us, it's years ago now, you started asking, okay, but what about the thread? And you've had haberdashers on here and you've talked about what other kinds of ways we can get our fabrics together. And I believe you've been involved with rayon thread. Isn't
I'm
that
all about the tencel. Yeah.
Tencel? But Tencel's rayon, right?
Is it? In the sense that it's probably from wood pulp. Yeah. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Tencel's. So the Tencel, I've been going with some cotton threads. I still
Mhm.
have polyesters and I'm still using them. But
Yeah. Sometimes I do use the recycled polyester as well because the tencel comes in a very limited color range.
no, I'm not using the polyester because of the color range. I'm using because I already own it. And we
Mm,
talked about the ethics
yeah.
of that too. Like, what are you going to do? So, as I just said, I gave away some brand new paper that I'm not writing on that kind of paper anymore. With the thread, I'm still using the polyester ones that I still have,
Hmm.
but I hate them. And when a color is gone, I'm replacing it in cotton.
Nice.
So Marianne's ideal would just have me touching polyester, and then I'm going to make polyester clothes or
Yeah.
partially. No.
But I think that that's it's once again, I think there's no one way to be more sustainable, is there? And
Oh, 100%. I said
yeah.
for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in a similar situation, I think, to yourself currently. Like, I have had a bit of a personal style change
Hmm.
recently, and there are certain things that I want to wear,
Hmm.
and that has led me to buying more fabric than I have done in previous years, or would in previous years would have had felt comfortable buying. But it's because
Hmm.
I want a specific thing, and I'm buying that thing to make that thing in that quantity, and I'm still prioritizing natural fibers,
Hmm.
but I am purchasing more things than I have done previous years because for me, right now, representing myself in a certain way, it's significant for me, you know?
And you talked to a lady a couple of weeks ago, and she was involved in the performance business, and she had to go to like
Yes.
auditions and things.
Yes, Lindsay Ashworth Fraser. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
And you all talked about some of the pressures that I think apply to a lot of women about what are you going to wear and what is your body supposed to look like. And I was listening to that saying, I know that works differently for white women than black women. I don't mean that black women don't also have pressures, but the way they function is different.
Right.
And a lot of black women feel pressure to not like their hair
Right.
and their hair texture. And my husband was very surprised to find out that they sell extensions for you to use. And almost nobody sells extensions where you would then have true afro textured hair.
Right.
When you're buying extensions, you usually would be getting extensions that make your hair look straighter, that would be more similar to what or some of them is actual hair of people from India, for example,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
that would make your hair look more like that. Very few. It's not Afro textured hair. He didn't believe it. Wow, they're doing that. They're believing that to look appropriate, that their regular hair isn't okay. So it's different than what your podcast friend was referring to. What I was thinking about those things because very often that hair is fake. That
Mm.
hair is synthetic.
Yeah.
Very often that's a polyester. And when you all were talking about some of those, again, I was thinking, I have seen how this works in the community.
Hmm.
And all of it is to the benefit of business.
Mm.
All of the something's wrong with your body, so you need this clothing to put on it, but not this other clothes. And then every year we're going to tell you how to look taller, how to look shorter. And you go back and you see these old magazines and you see them saying the same thing, is for the stout young woman, something like that.
Yeah.
All of these things are not helping us, the consumer. All of it's
Absolutely.
helping those those people. So for a person like yourself to take charge of what does she want to look like and say, all right, I want to buy this fabric. I want to use my sewing machine. I want to use my ideas of, I think you call it French girl style or some
Oh,
such.
French girl chic, yeah.
French girl chic, that you are choosing those and then you're creating it. You're not letting it be the business telling you that you're supposed to create it and then selling you all the elements. So I think that's a lot more wholesome. If I do want to say, my opinions, which I'm always free with opinions, but my opinions are that when you choose something and you then make the pieces, you're now going to use the Traveler's Notebook system, which is made by a company in Japan. And you buy these little cute little notebooks, and then you buy a leather cover and you place the little notebooks in the leather cover. What about if you made a leather cover yourself or even a fabric cover? What about if you made the notebooks inside? I have a friend that's making her own ink.
Cool. How do you make
Um,
ink?
I know you when the only way I learned to make ink is the walnut gall method, the oat gall method and the walnut gall. So my friend is making the inks and it's not made of oak. So I'm assuming you have to mash up something that gives pigment and you have to have a mordant in there and you have to have the right amount of liquid that it can carry on whether it's a brush you're using or a dip pen. Making ink that goes into a fountain pen is much more complicated than that. It has to have the right viscosity, but I know it has to have a mordant and it has to have a pigment and some liquid. That's all I know.
This is amazing. I need to go on an ink tube or something.
No, she's just making it. I don't think there's make your own ink tube, but she makes
There should
things.
be.
And
That's
she's
cool.
one of the members of our collective that we make things out of things. And you're making your French girl chic in your new style, and maybe some items. You said you've sold some items that you made, and you've given some away, and you've put them on some Vinted or something.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been paying attention to that, even though that's not my struggle. I'm happy that you are controlling your struggle rather than getting one of these companies. Don't you call it something like H&M or
Yeah.
whomever? These people to tell you you need this style. That I really detest. They tell you you
Sure.
need it and then they sell you plastic garments to make it happen.
Yes. Shams, what are you hoping for in 2026? What's that going to look like for you? What do you want more of?
So, I mean, if you're in a beauty pageant, you always hear someone say peace on earth. And I do really want to see more love toward these other human beings and animals and the environment. And when I think about my purpose as a person, I think it's to help people do that love and safety and attention to the humanity of the other, um, and especially through the medium of textiles. So I'd like to keep working with my collaborators in the Works in Progress Toronto, making things out of things that otherwise would be trash, teaching the public, holding workshops and swaps and things to specifically focus on textiles. Also, my work with the Textile Museum of Canada, helping share understandings of culture and communities with the use of textiles, and just continue in my own practice of creating and deconstructing and reusing. And I even aggressed to the neighbor. The neighbor was there and he had a hole in his shirt, and I said, wouldn't you like that to be repaired by your neighbor? you know um uh, I'd like to continue this activism first for betterment of the planet, and the method I choose, being through textiles. It would be great if political leaders would turn their hearts to goodness. I'm a religious person. I don't think you have to be a religious person to be a good person, but you have to turn your heart toward others with love. And I hear so much about, oh, they're not like us. Oh, they don't deserve. Oh, they shouldn't be. And I'm hoping that in 2026 that we get a minimum of that.
I
and
love
a,
that.
a bonus of care.
I love that. Oh, you've done it. You've made me cry.
Oh God, making Zoe cry again. I didn't come here for that, but if you're going to ask me, I'm going to tell you. That's what I'm hoping for.
No, it's okay. Oh,
What are you
Shams.
hoping for in the 2026?
More community. More
Mhm.
community. I want, what we were saying before. I want to continue to put myself and my family where possible in positions where we are connecting with people, both the people that we know and love already and people that we might not otherwise have the opportunity to rub shoulders with. I want more travel. I want to do more trips, probably by and large within the UK. I want to connect with people through sewing and beyond. I've got some cool stuff planned, some cool stuff coming up in those regards, and I just want to continue to use the platform that I've created to explore these ideas and hopefully inspire people to come to their own conclusions and make their own experiments in living in a more sustainable way, but a more fulfilling way, a more creatively fulfilling way. And I think being more with other people, being less isolated and on the internet, being a bit more analog, I think these are tools in that,
And I love the analog. And so I'd like to continue to encourage you and support you by maybe doing some more interviews this year.
Yes, please.
So I support your podcast and your columns and your blogs and your efforts. You're really working very hard to help share the things that you're learning about sustainability in sewing and other areas. And now you have your gardening podcast too. This is important work. And I'm proud and happy to support you and the other people in whichever space. Are they doing it on the internet? Are they doing it in a book? Or are they doing it in a local community way to say, we can all be fixers and menders, not just during the winter of care and repair.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So unless we're lucky enough to live around the corner to you, where can people find you and follow what you're doing?
So I took my previous Instagram private when I became board chair at the Textile Museum. So if you know me personally, you'll be following me on my initial Instagram. If you're a new friend, you could find me at sepia_textiles on Instagram. And I'm posting all of my, again, public appropriate posts on that format. And also, I think if you come to visit the Textile Museum of Canada, if you're coming, please send me a note. It's likely that I could meet you down there and say hi to you. I encourage you, if you're coming through Toronto, it's downtown. We encourage you to come and see us there. And very likely, if I'm in Toronto, see me there too. I think those are the main ways to get in touch with me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shams. Thank you so much. This has been long overdue, and I don't want it to be as long next time I get to speak to you.
Okay. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!